Where does human factors come into the product design process?
I have witnessed firsthand how products are sometimes not designed for everyone. It's important to say that if the human factors and usability process is not done right, then the product is never going to be suitable for people to use. That means that they might not get the benefit of life-saving treatment. So it's a very important impact to have this process right.
Welcome to this next episode of the Crux Spotlight podcast. Crux Product Design is an international class-leading product design agency that works with a whole variety of global clients on product design, always with a focus upon business success. I'm Dominic Walters, I'm an independent consultant, and in this series I'm looking to examine what makes for great world-class product design, and in particular what makes Crux so good at it. In this episode, we're going to look at how Crux actually defines and ascertains what customers and clients need. We're going to be talking about human factors and about usability. And to do that, I have Alejandra Anderson from the Crux Human Factors team with us to talk about it. Ali, hello.
Hey, Dom. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for joining us. We've just been talking about human factors and usability, so I guess it would be a good place to start to define what the terms are. So what do we mean by human factors and what do they do?
Yeah, so human factors is the study of the human capabilities and how humans interact with products and systems. If we look at human factors and engineering, then we are talking about the application of the human factors principles, including the physical, the cognitive abilities, but also the limitations, experiences, expectations of the users in order to make products easy to use for the users, but also making them enjoyable to use, reducing risk, and making them safe and effective to use.
Okay. And where does human factors come into the product design process, if you like?
So what we're intending with the human factors process is understand the needs of the intended users and understand the environment of use where products and systems will be used. So we can translate that into product requirements, which then will lead to products which are best suited for the intended users. So it's an iterative process where we have an understanding, an investigation and understanding of the user needs, which then lead to the design of better products for that specific intended population and for that specific environment.
And when we talk about human factors, what does it involve? Is it observation? Is it putting people in through tests? How does it operate?
I think what is important to understand is the human factors is looking into understanding people and understanding how they interact with the world with a focus on the products or systems that we design. So in order to understand that, we need to look at different disciplines. Human factor involves psychology, involves behavior science, just to understand how people think, what they do. We also need to understand their physical interactions with products and systems. So this looks into anthropometrics and ergonomics as well. So there is a number of tools and methods that we can use in order to understand how people interact with their world. It's very important that the tools are used in a suitable way at different parts of the process. So at the very beginning of the design process, we might want to gather those user needs, gather observations that might not be intended for a specific product, but maybe we just want to understand how people, what is the need. But then as we go along with the design process and as the design gains more resolution, then we want to start testing the design. So that's when the testing and all of this human factor studies come into place. I want just to reinforce the idea that the interaction with the user is not limited to the later stages of the human factors. We really want to start talking with users from the very beginning and throughout the design process, because at the beginning, just in order to gather in their user needs, their limitations, their feelings, their behaviors, we want to ask them directly. And then as we test the products, we want to get them involved ideally to make a collaborative effort of design, which it's a principle that I believe in, ultimately to ensure that the needs of those specific users are represented in the final design.
Okay, so it sounds like their involvement at the start is more about what do you need, and then as you start to formulate some responses to that, how effective is this, or how could you use this, or how closely is this to what you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And essentially at the in the later stages, just asking them whether different solutions work or which solution works better for them. That's why we have this iterative process of design where we might have a variety of concepts. What we do at Crux is that we really like to emphasize on this contrasting design, so we can gather very sort of broad insights and apply those into a refinement process of this design process.
Okay. So out of interest then, what kind of people work in the Crux human factors teams? What sort of specialisms and expertise do they bring?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I have the fortune to work alongside people from variety of fields. So in my particular case, my background is in design, but some of my colleagues are psychologists and they have a specialism in behavioral science, and other colleagues have their background in mechanical engineering. So we really want to have that variety of knowledge that we can use collaboratively in order to tackle projects from different perspectives and see projects with different lenses as needed.
And I understand that Crux is a real market leader in human factors. What do you think makes it a market leader? I guess part of it is what you just said, the people who work in human factors, but what else?
Well, the people is a good element, is one of the main elements, having the different knowledge in the same room, but also having the tools and the ability to develop innovative tools in order to capture insights in a disruptive way, if I may say. So, for example, if we encounter a challenge, if we encounter a problem, certain data that it's been historically difficult to capture, we have all of the tools, the knowledge, and also the passion to ideate around the potential solutions. And we also have the capability in-house to develop tools to capture specific data on users. So, for example, having different sensors adapted to devices just to capture the forces or the interactions of people with certain devices, but also from the spectrum of doing ethnographic research on site to understand how people interact with products in their natural environment of use. So I would say is the innovative way of using tools and creating tools where those don't exist in the market.
Okay, so it's a combination of skills, the tools, the approach. You've used a couple of phrases there I'm not familiar with. If we go back and ask you, ethnographic, what is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So ethnographic research is a method of qualitative investigation or qualitative research where you observe users interacting with their environment or interacted with products and systems in their natural environment of use. So it's getting into the shoes of the user and identifying what challenges they might encounter in their natural environment, how they behave, how they interact with other people in their natural environment, and the impact of the cultural practices, the social behaviors, the limitations that they might have in their specific environment of use. So this is a highly qualitative method that we have used in the past and we have found very useful just to see how the real interactions of different users.
So when you say highly qualitative, it's about observing, it's about talking, it's about understanding their issues and how they use certain things. You also used a phrase earlier,
Anthropometric.
Anthropometric, that's it. What does that mean?
Yeah, so anthropometric, it's the capturing of quantitative data related to the interactions of the humans with different products and systems.
Okay.
So it's the quantifiable information about those interactions.
Right.
So if I give you an example of anthropometric data, we might be looking at the measurements of people, how tall, how wide people are, the measurements of their hands, and this is something vital to inform designs because we want to design products with which fit the measurements of the population,
Right.
but also we're looking at their capabilities in terms of strengths. So if I give you an example of this, the strength of a user, let's say a patient, that they have to exert for interacting with a syringe. So we want to look at that data just to ensure that the design and the product that we're designing really fits the capabilities and also the limitations of the population.
I see. Okay. So I have heard people say that human factors is really just about usability. And I know that's not right, but help us understand the difference, please. And I know one is a subset of the other, I guess, but what's the key difference?
Yeah, so human factors and usability are very similar terms, and they are intertwined, indeed. So as I explained before, human factors is the study of the human capabilities and human interactions with products and systems. However, usability is an attribute, like a qualitative attribute, so it's a measurable indicator of how easy or difficult it is to use products and systems. So we could say that a sound human factors process could result in a better usability of the product. So these are concepts which are connected, and ultimately the one of the end goals of human factors is providing good usability for the intended users.
Right. So usability, in my words, but usability is about how you use something, I guess, how useful it is, as the name suggests. Human factors starts to look at other factors like emotions, perhaps, or the other constraints that people are working under, or the environment they're in, etc. All the things that influence how they approach the product, as well as how easy it is to use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got it right. Yeah. Human factors is looking at the variety of factors that may have an impact on how effectively people interact with products and systems.
Right.
Which ultimately would lead into usability, into better usability.
Okay, well, build on that, Ali. If you could give us an example. I know a lot of the stuff you're working on is confidential, but if you can, give us an example of how human factors has influenced the development of a product, please, a real-life product.
Yeah, I think that there's a project that I would love to share. It was a project that aimed to develop a respiratory device that was intended to deliver dry powder through the nasal tract,
right,
in order to prevent people from getting ill from a disease such as the COVID-19, so a respiratory disease. And this project came in the context of the pandemic. So the purpose of the project was to create a product that could be distributed across the world, but with a special focus on the low and middle income countries. So we had a huge challenge here because, as I explained before, we want to understand the users. And usually for the products that we design, we have a specific cohort of users. So you would have patients with specific diseases or specific conditions. Mm-hmm. However, in this project, we had a global population as our intended users, which make the challenge of understanding their needs very big. Mm-hmm. So we decided that we needed to get into the user's shoes and conduct ethnographic research in different locations. So we initially conducted 2 pieces of research, one in Colombia, my home country, and another in India. The first research was intended to capture those initial user needs, capture observations about potential challenges to transport, to storage, to access to health technologies. Whereas the second research intended to present different concepts to users and getting their feedback about their use of those concepts into the real environment of use. So that was a really, really eye-opening experience. It was great to have the users looking at our concepts and seeing how the designs that we created could work in the real world. If I'm able to share just one insight that we had, a very interesting insight on how it was translated into the design. We visited a factory, a workshop where workers were creating fabrics, and it was a handmade process. One of our assumptions was that if the device was portable enough and small enough, then that would make it easier for users to have a dose of this drug in the middle of the day, so they could have it on the go, or they could have a dose at work. Mm-hmm. when we visited this workshop, we started to see the work conditions and the work routines of these workers in India. And we noticed that they were barely wearing any clothes.
Right.
Obviously, the weather was so hot, it was over 45 degrees, that they were not comfortable wearing clothes, so they didn't have any pockets to put the device in or to store the device. And in further conversation with the workers, it was evident that the convenience was an important element for them to adhere to that treatment, and it was not convenient to have to use a device in the middle of their work routines. So that informed the design in terms of understanding what was important for people, how can we make them use the device as intended or this treatment as intended, and ultimately the importance of that is that we might be having a big impact on how they adhere to life-saving treatment.
So just that bit of information, that crucial bit of information, which otherwise may have been missed, you've helped make sure that more people will take the full dosage or complete the whole course of their treatment and probably save or impact upon their lives anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be a headache for the engineers to try to adjust the engine and the internal components of the device just to adjust according to this insight. But I think what is important and what this project was great for is because the clients understood the importance of making people adhere to treatment and making people use the device as intended, otherwise they're not going to get the benefit of this amazing drug. So understanding what was important for them, their limitations, their routines was crucial, and it's a crucial part of this project, which hopefully will have more phases of development.
Yes, and I can imagine that's incredibly satisfying to be part of the revelation of that. So building on that, Ali, what particularly do you like most about your work in human factors? What excites you about it? What do you enjoy most?
Well, my background is in graphic design, and I believe that I selected that field because I really wanted to make impact in people's lives and hopefully make it better. So having the opportunity to work in human factors has really allowed me to do that, to do what I dreamed of when I selected this field. There has been a lot of learning, a lot of growing professionally, but also having the opportunity to understand people and to bring my context. Growing in a Latin American country, I have witnessed firsthand how products are sometimes not designed for everyone. So having that context and that opportunity of bringing the knowledge that I have and the passion that I have for making visible the needs of people that sometimes are not represented in the products that we use in our daily lives. I think that's amazing of my job, and that's what I really enjoy about.
I can imagine, yeah. Out of interest, does your team do standalone projects at all? So would you, for example, do a human factors analysis and then present that to a client? Or does it always have to be part of a product development program?
I think it varies depending on the needs of the client. So sometimes there are standalone pieces of work where the client only needs a piece of research, or they need assessing a specific product. They need to conduct, for example, a heuristic analysis, which is an assessment of the usability of a product based on the heuristic principles. So there are many standalone pieces of work that we do. However, usually these come related with a product development or a design and engineering process. And usually we work in collaboration with other development teams. And I think that's where we thrive, where we have the opportunity to impact the design and having voice in this process.
I can see that. Out of interest, what are heuristic principles you mentioned?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So heuristic principles are, let's say, universally accepted principles that define good usability. Okay. So these were established in the industry a while ago, and it's a way for you to assess products and assess the usability of products and systems, looking at principles which are universally accepted and which are understood to have an impact on usability. So, for example, one principle might be the learnability of a product.
Right.
So you might want to see if a product is easy to learn. And if it's not, then it's not complying with that heuristic principle.
I see. Okay. So there are accepted principles that basically good product design is based upon, or at least good analysis, good human factors is based upon. Okay.
Yeah, principles for good usability.
Right. Okay. Clearly, as with everything, the world is going to change. That we have technological changes, we have AI, we've got other things coming in. So what do you see will shape the future of human factors research? And what is Crux doing to stay ahead of that, if you like?
Yeah, I think I see the human factors future in the use of innovative tools in innovative ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to say that keeping the user at the core of these innovations is going to be fundamental for the future of human factors. So the development of tools that really helps us understanding the detail of the interactions, that's where I see the most potential. Also quantifying the interactions that back in the past would have been very difficult to quantify.
Right.
For example, using sensing devices that help you understanding how people with different limitations, for example, a patient with a disability, interact with the product, and then having that information that which then would inform design recommendations. So that's where I see there's the most potential for the future. And well, Crux is developing so many tools at the moment, including, as I mentioned, these sensor technologies that help us quantify interactions, but also increasing the level of analysis as well. AI and machine learning are tools that can help us understanding better the insights. Will never replace the human element of the interactions with the users, but can help us understanding data and analyzing data that we capture if it comes in quantities.
Because I guess a key part of your role is knowing what questions to ask and how to interpret people's responses. And a lot of that, I guess, will be around the tone of what they say. And that can't be replaced by AI. But I guess, as you say, AI can be used to help you process the findings from those questions.
Yeah, and as we use more tools that capture quantifiable data related to interactions with products and systems, then we need more capability in our systems to process all of that data, and that's where AI can be really helpful. But as I said before, the human element cannot be replaced. We have to be careful in how to use those tools so we are not replacing the human element and the physical and the contact with the user and the observations that you can capture by looking in the environment.
Yes.
And talking with people. Those cannot be replaced by those tools, I would say.
I guess trust is a key part of what you do, because often you're asking people to give you quite detailed information about themselves, their habits, their practices and their preferences. And I guess you have to build a certain amount of trust with them to do that. And that requires a strong element of human contact, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there is an ethical element involved in the human factors, which is very important as well. We want to capture data that could be used to improve the life of other people or improve the products that we design so they can provide a benefit for other people. So in that context, we capture that data, which in other ways people might not be willing to share. However, the human element, the trust that we build with participants, and also the processes in place in order to protect that data, that's something that is vital.
Yes, I can imagine that's important, because people want to know that the quite personal information about them, how it's going to be used and safeguarded, I guess. So Ali, you talked a bit about some of the trends you expect that will influence human factors. Let's look at it from the client perspective as well. What are some of the things, some of the requirements that you think clients are going to be asking about when it comes to human factors in the coming years?
I think clients are very interested in diversifying the level of insights that we get and the level of data and information, in terms of they're more and more interested in getting participants and getting users with limitations, with disabilities, patients with different ways of learning, for example, so that we can look at those extreme scenarios or those that people that historically has been excluded from research. So they really want to have an understanding of how different people interact with their products to adjust the product specifications. Yes. So I think before we didn't see that trend that much, but nowadays clients are being very demanding in terms of looking at the data of a specific cohorts, especially cohorts that would struggle with the products, so we can meet the needs of those specific users.
I see. So I guess a lot of that will be driven by their aim for more inclusion, so that encouraged to incorporate people with a wider range of abilities, but also a wider range of experiences of life.
Yeah, absolutely. So traditionally, we would have used, for example, databases, which are based from the 60s, from the 70s, which would describe people with different sizes to the sizes that we see nowadays, or different capabilities from different locations. So that's not really that applicable anymore. And that's the reason why what we do at Crux is that we want to capture those insights real life. We want to capture those insights with the users and almost build up this database that is up to date, but also that is representative of diverse users. Yeah. So you might have people with disabilities of different types. You might have people with different levels of health literacy, different limitations, and then that database that we're building will be much more inclusive and would help the design to represent the needs of that people. Right. So I think that clients are becoming more and more interested in including those historically excluded populations and making sure that their designs and their products are really suitable for everyone.
Ali, thank you very much for talking us through all the things you do in human factors. It really is a fascinating area. It'd be interesting, just to bring us into land as we finish, if you could pinpoint one key thing, and it's probably a very difficult question, but one key thing that you can take from, or someone can take from the conversation that we've just been having about it.
Yeah, that's a difficult one because, I would love people to gain so much learning from this conversation. But if there was one thing, I would like to emphasize on the importance on getting the human factors and the usability right from the beginning, and on the importance of understanding the user, stepping into their shoes, and really trying to imagine what would be to use your product in their environment of use, or with the capabilities, their emotions, their motivations, expectations, their knowledge, trying to understand what might be difficult for them and what the challenges they might face in their real life. So it's important to say that if the human factors and usability process is not done right, then the product is never going to be suitable for people to use. Okay. And especially if we're looking at healthcare and medical devices and the design of medical devices, that means that they might not get the benefit of life-saving drug or life-saving treatment. So it's a very important impact to have this process right. So I would like people to get that message, and to share the passion that I have about human factors usability, and to getting to know people and how the challenges that they might have in their daily lives.
Thank you. Very clear. So human factors is not just an add-on or an option. It's crucial to making sure you get good products. Fantastic. Alejandra, thank you very much.
Thank you, Don, for inviting me.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Crux Spotlight podcast. We really look forward to seeing you on the next edition.